Welcome. It's October, and we are going to be talking about the I Ching predictions for the month of October and how we maneuver through the energy currents that have already started and will be transitioning throughout the month. Deborah, welcome.
Deborah Monroy for I Ching October 2025.
To start off, before the month of October, there was an opportunity to look at the last 3 months and reflect on those. So that would be July, August, and September to see if goals and values had changed or what things we were doing to support ourselves, like practices that are mentioned at the beginning of this book, the I Ching predictions for 2025, written by Eve Smith. And before we start with October, we'd said in our last conversation in September that we would have a brief update on this. I was reflecting, and I use my book like a journal, and I was looking over what I wrote today in preparation, and it almost sounded like I was already getting ready for some of the actions or advice that came in this month of October. Under reflections, and I love that Eve has reflective questions throughout each chapter. The first one, a question that really struck me was, what did I learn from the energy of July, of August, and September? I found that first, if from July, it was to get regrounded and be prepared. And then from August, it was to use my skills, my curiosity, and my values in expression of the work that I'm doing. And for me, it's my YouTube channel. Make sure that the actions that I'm taking are consistent with my values and that I'm staying grounded. And then for September, it was again the small steps to go back and work on my budget. We had talked about that. But again, it was like managing the details and the small steps. And then when I looked into what the questions and the collective energy was for October, many of those same principles or skills are coming up again. Did you find that to be true for you?
I agree with this first part of October, which is a part of fulfillment, which I relish, but otherwise, I felt a lot of being overwhelmed these past few months. In part, it's because of the region I live in. Atlanta, it's very hot and humid. Things are starting to lighten up a little bit, but I felt overwhelmed quite a bit. And so I didn't go month by month, but I want to read a brief quote by a therapist, Mark Manson. He's well known. So overall, and I'm a photographer, and there's no art form more detailed photography. It's more the precision of the image, etc. But I started out as a painter, so I like broad strokes. And this quote is something that applies to my life every day. And I'll just read it. It's very brief. And he says, "You don't build resilience by feeling good all the time. You build resilience by getting better at feeling bad." Which is to say, just relax and understand there are going to be good days, bad days. When we get to October, the beginning of October is really expressive and productive and full of fulfillment. And then it's going to get more constrained as we go further into October. And I like that, the idea of resilience. Resilience is a big product these days. I think since the epidemic, we've heard a lot about resilience, but understanding that I can't pinpoint a detail every hour of every day. And I just want to go with that overall feeling of building that general quality of resilience. The I Ching is called the Book of Changes for an excellent reason. It is trying to coach us to cope with change, which is happening a lot these days and pretty much every day. The idea of permanent impermanence, constant impermanence. And I honor that. And I just want to build in the general sense of toggling between the good and the bad, low energy, high energy. I don't want to feel overwhelmed with the details, but I do want to go forward.
Impermanence of things. And I had written for the beginning of chapter 16, which is the chapter that we're talking about, October, fulfillment and restraint. It's going to change. The energy is going to change back to restraint. But change is nature's way. Also said throughout the book that change is inevitable, that it's constant. And like you said, Deborah, I think about learning to maneuver in that and not getting overwhelmed and trying to force things to stay permanent because they're going to change. They're always changing. Maybe it's a fool's dream to think that things can be the same. What do you think?
I think actually of another quote from not a therapist, but an anthropologist who said about people, he said, we're a group that's in transition. We're not this, we're not that, we're in the middle. We love change because we get bored with sameness, but we love sameness because we're terrified of change. So we're toggling between those two. And with the I Ching, with the encouragement in this book, as it encourages us to reflect, to be mindful and reflect. That's the one of many good takeaways that I find in this book is the encouragement to reflect and try to be graceful with respect to change. Don't fall down the stairs. Try to run at a respectable rate down the stairs when you got to hurry. And that's the takeaway for me is to try and build that flexibility, that resilience. Again, the word is a little bit overused. It does have a good sound to it, doesn't it? Kind of a suppleness, the idea of bending and being flexible, bending and flexing, and trying to be graceful in coping with change.
Being a gardener, what you were talking about, the resilience, it's like if you're a reed, you can go back and forth. But if you're a solid fixture, you just go womp over. When you talked about fulfillment, the energy, the collective is getting things done. There's kind of let's get stuff done, let's move forward. And then there's a warning, which I thought was very interesting, the danger of overreaching. I find that I have that tendency sometimes with projects. I either take on too much or it's too big and I don't chunk it down. And if I can chunk it down into the little small specific steps and take the time to reflect on if this is a good project, how am I going to get it done? And what should I do first? And do I have the resources to do it and the energy, blah, 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 then I can slowly move towards it as opposed to, oh, we're going to just go and knock this out of the park. I don't know. Do you see that?
Yeah, I do, but I always keep this saying in mind because I love it. Remember, Joan Rivers said, you don't know how far you can go until you've gone too far. And it's sometimes hard to be more restrained, which is what this book is going to recommend we do in the second half of October. It's important to be restrained, to try and be measured, and as you say, to plan and not overdo. We don't want to overcommit. That's very true on the one hand. On the other hand, it's true that sometimes you just don't know until you're over your head. But restraint and mindfulness, and there is, I believe it mentions that, awareness, having the awareness of energy transitions on page 91 in the October chapter. Having the awareness of energy transitions help you concentrate on important matters. So awareness, try to plan, try to be aware, try to be aware if you're totally going off the deep end. Again, I think it is human nature to overextend that way. Hopefully not as a way of life, but from time to time. I wonder if there's a month coming up, maybe it's December, where excess is going to be the rule of the day.
Being the collective energy, there may be all around you conversations and things that are happening that promote that you have to be careful and considerate of what can you do and what's viable given your circumstances.
It asks you several times to stop and reflect, and then the chapter poses a series of questions to help us remain aligned. Alignment is huge. Intentional practices. It feels like there's a lot in this chapter to reflect on. Maybe it's because we're coming to the end of the calendar year. There's quite a bit going on. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but the October takeaways are really a good summary of how to go forward. That's at the end of the chapter.
I found the reflection questions in the very beginning about fulfillment. The first one really struck me. And am I feeling procrastination,
Yeah,
dread,
yes.
fear, anxiety, or stress about a goal, a project, or a system that I'm creating? That's a red flag. Stop for a minute instead of plunging ahead. That's how I'm
Mhm.
interpreting it. Check in with how you're feeling. And I think Eve refers to another part earlier in the book when she had a gut check in that if you're not feeling right about this, maybe you should listen to your body
Yeah.
that's kind of
Yes.
communicating with you about your emotions around this, and that maybe you need to, as you said, stop and reflect and get grounded. What were some of the ways she talked about grounding?
Being authentic and acting in good faith, which I think is a consistent theme. Being authentic and acting in good faith will help to guide us to do the right thing.
And also, I think there's a theme that I'm noticing throughout this, and that's gathering your first circle or those people around you who can uplift you, support you, or help you. If you have a specific project or something to accomplish, you have trusted mentors or guides or friends that you can bounce ideas off of rather than just plunging into something to nurture those relationships. Because going forward, I think as you go into the end of the chapter and probably into the end of the year and maybe even into 2026, that you're going to rely on those people as your community of support. That's going to make a big difference. I noticed she also mentions some of the things to ground yourself with. You can do meditation. You can do a walking meditation where you can actually go out and even if it's possible, go barefoot someplace. I'm always a little leery about ants biting me or snakes jumping out or things like spiders, whatever.
Yeah.
But go out in the grass, and that's a great way to ground yourself. But just walking in nature, there's certainly opportunities, even if you're in an urban environment. You think of Atlanta, where you're living, as a big city, but there are many pockets of small parks and paths that you can take where you can go and walk. And I know there's a lake near you that you can walk around and have moments of reflection. And these are practices, I think, that help one stay centered and focused as well as relief of stress. What do you think?
It is important to, along with reflecting, to move, get out and move, do a walking meditation, or work in the garden as you do. I find while I'm swimming that it's a wonderful way to reflect. Being in the water, I don't have anything to do except to go back and forth from point A to point B, and it's a wonderful way to let my mind do some work or not work and just be in that space of the water, which is totally fluid. I don't have my cell phone with me, so there's no distraction. The only distraction is in my head. It's a great way to focus. Moving and thinking, moving and reflecting.
For me, those were some of the important points that were brought out in this chapter about managing myself within the energy currents that are here and that we're going into. And so the transitional energy, it's going to move into restraint. And we had restraint in another month. if I recall, it's like small steps, getting clear, trying to maintain your focus and clarity. What do you remember about that?
That's true. Restraint comes up periodically. The transition, I think the restraint issue came up in July with respect to the collective energy, but it predicts after the fulfillment aspect breakdowns, quarrels, punishment, misfortune that may come our way. And we need to be able to deal with that in turn, being able to deal with discord, disharmony.
Again, this is the collective energies. So, in the world, in the environment, how we manage when we see this or hear this or feel this going on. She had three steps. The first one was, what are the facts?
Mhm.
Many times you hear stuff and there's a reaction, and this is where the restraint comes in. Take a minute and try to sort out the facts. And that may take quite a few minutes to sort out the facts because there's so much noise and information, and some of it is true, some of it is not true, some of it is misleading. But try to get the facts and then think about or try to explore the different perspectives about the situation or the quarrel or the misfortune or the upset so that you can think about things from a variety of perspectives and not just an automatic response to it. And then the last thing is, where do you want to fall on the side of this quarrel or
Mhm.
upset or whatever? Choose thoughtfully where you want to position yourself. And that actually, those three things are remarkable and gives you a way to control
Mhm.
yourself and your reaction in the middle of it sounds like chaos around you. When I was reading this and looking at what's going on around the world right now, I'd say we're
Mm.
already there. We've already moved
Sure.
from fulfillment into the transitional energy in terms of the upset and the quarrels and all of those breakdowns. And I know that Eve has written multiple times that there's no prescription on when the energy changes, that the energy can be a fleeting moment and then change to something else, or it can take a month and seem to elongate. I got that sense when I was reading that we have already moved into the transitional energy. What do you think, Deborah?
Well, I'm hoping for at least a few more days of fulfillment energy myself, but certainly the collective energy is challenging these days. The first takeaway from the October takeaways is honor transitions. So recognize the importance of small intentional steps and embrace the natural chaos of new beginnings. And I believe it's the Chinese symbol for chaos is also the symbol for opportunity. I was a manager for a medical center for a while, and we did see our share of chaos. I would tell staff there's opportunity, but sometimes it was a hard sell. I believe that is true, that the two faces, the two aspects, chaos, opportunity, opportunity, chaos. Hopefully, we're up for the task of making the transition from chaos to opportunity.
Whether we're up to it or not, it's coming. Or
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
already here. And it's
it's,
not
yeah.
just in our community or in our country, but my goodness, around the world. Things are happening all over the place. But as you pointed out in the book, that when you have a shift like that, new beginnings, they are chaotic. You're trying to figure out what's going on. And that's where finding out what the facts are about it and what are the perspectives and taking a position so that you can then manage going forward, manage yourself. That's the whole point of knowing about the collective. Some people are having anxiety attacks. I guess I don't feel that one needs to go to that extreme. What do you think?
I think it depends on the individual. I mean, you want to honor your anxiety if that's where you are. I'm thinking, again, going back to the October takeaway, the second one is to release stagnancy. And in a sense, if you're experiencing anxiety or some kind of dumpster fire of emotion, fires burn stuff up and it can release, you can get rid of stuff, ideally, if you don't remain stuck in the anxiety hopefully you can burn your way through it. And that would be a way to turn that chaos or the anxiety into a kind of opportunity to get rid of some stuff. I mean, reflect on it. Where is it coming from? Where would I like to go from here? And hopefully move beyond it by moving through it.
Sometimes get really stressed out. And if I will do my morning pages and just write, sometimes just the writing and the getting still. Or last Friday night, I went to a gong bath that Eve did, and just the sound was so relaxing. I fell asleep during it, and I hadn't been sleeping all that well. That's why meditation works. And there are many practices that Eve has talked about. People do yoga, they do Tai Chi, walking meditation, I do gardening, and you lose yourself. And it's a way to kind of interrupt some of those emotions and reset yourself a little bit. So, do you think that that's one way to stay grounded?
Exactly. I was going to say that's the number three under the October takeaways. Number three is stay grounded, use daily practice, meditate or don't stress about not meditating. And, whatever your daily practice is that helps you stay grounded or regulate your feelings and regulate your perspective without becoming stuck in the perspective. Quite a balancing act, don't you think? Especially as we get older and we have more to balance.
People think we have less to balance, but you always have a
Sorry.
lot to balance, no matter where you are, I think, in whatever
Oh,
stage
I'm
of life.
afraid so.
That's just life. That's just like change is inevitable. It's a constant. Stuff to do is inevitable. I call it the business of life, living in
Yeah,
the world. There are things you got to do if you want to live and have some joy.
that's an excellent point to have some joy. Let's go back to the fulfillment portion of October. I think it's important, and I tend to be bad about this, but I'm working on it. But take a moment to celebrate fulfillment because the next chapter might be contentious, breakdowns, but take a moment to celebrate the fulfillment while it's happening and step back and congratulate yourself on managing the fulfillment aspect of the month before we go over the waterfall and get into the more turbulent aspect of the month. Take a moment to celebrate and have joy, experience joy.
That is so important. And while you said that, it just reminded me of when I'm doing my morning pages, I always start with things are working out for me. And then I give examples of how things have worked out. And it's my form of, like you said, celebrating. And I write it down, it documents it. So if I go back and look at it over time, it's, well, that worked and that worked. And I changed this and look at all this. It's a sense of progress or momentum or just pleasure.
A sense of accomplishment, which is the full part of fulfillment, or that abundance of good feeling. You've earned it, you've worked for it. Take a moment to enjoy that.
I think even during the transitional energy, the restraint, where there's breakdowns, quarrels, punishment, and misfortunes, there are moments of pleasure or appreciation. I guess that's part of the mindfulness. I came home from the dermatologist. Today I was a little upset because I had to have a couple of things frozen, and it was, is this ever going to end? And there was this mockingbird sitting on a trellis in my garden, singing its heart out. And that just took over everything and it interrupted all of my concerns and worries. And that just a moment of joy listening to that beautiful song after song after song after song, that because they're mocking all the different bird calls, looking out, where is it? And oh, look at those plants are blooming. It was just a wonderful moment. And those are available to us.
Yes, that's the fourth takeaway. Reminds me, I think that mockingbirds have tremendous integrity. They imitate with abandon. That's their job. They do it really well. Number four, act with integrity. How you handle conflict and chaos speaks volumes about your character. My parents passed away in recent years, and more this last year or two. I miss them hugely. But I also realized how fortunate I was in that being the oldest, I think I got the best parental experience in our family because my parents had a lot of integrity and they had a lot of respect for me. And I find myself falling back on that. I didn't screw up as a kid or teenager that often, and it was acknowledged, but it was not dwelt on. And my parents rarely, until much later, they did not overreact. They were very careful, very respectful, and very measured in their response. And that set an excellent example for me. And we live in stressful times. And I realize sometimes when I'm able to step back from chaos or contentiousness or a fractured argument, I follow that example, and I'm grateful for that example.
This is where having that group of people around you that uplift and that can guide and give good guidance and different perspective can really benefit you in terms of staying the course with your own values. And they can point out potentially traps or pitfalls, or from their own experience, share things that worked better than other things so that you can expand your perspective. And the
Number
last one, number 5.
Prepare for opportunities, staying aligned with your values during turbulent times, which is basically each day of our lives, sets the stage for growth and success. So October's energy is one of transition, which again brings us back to the name of the book, the I Ching, the Book of Changes. How do we deal with change? How do we grow to deal with change? How can we grow to make change work for us? Try to keep that in mind, which would bring us back to the opportunity aspect of prepare for opportunities.
That's really great. How can we work to make change work for us?
Right.
And she ends the chapter by saying, focus on balance and intentionality. So, what do you think she's saying in terms of intentionality?
Again, I think trying to be mindful, trying to reflect, as the book encourages us periodically to reflect. However, you notice that last statement in the chapter, you will feel the change of energy when events and people around you grow contentious. So be prepared. I think that it goes hand in hand with most of us feeling so much stress these days, being somewhat short-tempered.
I really like the thing about staying grounded and aligned, the
Mhm.
importance of that. And I know that I've always thought of yoga and other things as great practices, but it just hit me when I read this chapter how important those things are. And it's no surprise they've been around for thousands of years and have worked successfully in different cultures. Each culture has had its own mystics and its own people who've tried to help people maintain their balance and integrity and intention, whether it's in written scriptures or in practices. Those things are important.
As Buddhists, we tend to focus on sitting meditation, and it works really well for many people. But I think also the traditions that you're mentioning, yoga, Tai Chi, which is a motion-based meditation, Qigong, also motion-based meditation, along with gardening. I think it's important to know where you are and to focus on what kind of intervention, what kind of activity or lack of activity, what's going to help you deal with contentiousness, deal with change. What practice of the day is going to lead you to greater peace of mind?
How important it is to have some structure, a daily structure, because I find when I get stressed, it's easy to interrupt the kind of things that I normally do, like my morning pages, they disappear. And it's important to keep bringing myself back to the things that I know create that joy and that inner peace. And to do those and not to get swept up and lost in all the swirling energy, because there's all kinds of things that'll pull you away from having the time to do it. And I think a lot of people give up on practices and they say, I don't have time. Well, you have all the time there is. It's your time. You can do it however you want. This conversation has brought me back to understanding how fundamentally important these kind of practices in our life. And it's not just some guru or whatever. It's bigger than that. It's foundational
Right.
stuff.
It's a lifestyle and a lifelong practice.
Come to the end of the chapter, and for me, a profound conversation, and
Definitely.
really has helped underline the importance in my daily life of some of the practices that I'd put in place years ago. I want to maintain them and I want to enjoy them. And I'm determined to enjoy my life, to live it fully and with grace and enthusiasm and contribution as I can, and the pleasure of being with good friends and family, people that I love. That's how I want to spend and focus my time and not get caught up and dragged away from those things by these energy currents. They're going to be there no matter what, but I can maneuver and choose my path within them. And I think that's the point, don't you?
Right. I think that's mentioned in the chapter. Intentionality and good faith hopefully move you to remain consistent and to build the life of your choosing. It won't be handed to you, but you can work to create it. And in spite of contentiousness, try to maintain a balance.
That's actually hope, the sense of hope that one can do that. And there will be breakdowns, and it will look like everything you put in place isn't working anymore. But you have the opportunity to rebuild it. It's your life. You can
Right.
keep putting it back together, and it may look different. It will look different every time, but that's okay too. If you have your core values in place, and like you said, Deborah, the integrity. So the parting words of the chapter, you want to read
Right.
those for us?
You will feel the change of energy when events and people around you grow contentious. And that will bring us to the contentious month of November.
And the thing about November, while we're going, oh no, contentious, just know that there is a changing energy in the month. So while it may start out contentious, which I feel is almost like a spillover from November, it will change towards the end. Book a change, right?
Yes.
And we're going to have a guest, Donald, who works with human design, and he is looking forward to joining in the November conversation with us.
Great.
So
Great.
that'll be quite something to talk about then.
Until then, embrace change and embrace your inner dragon.
Remember that inner dragon is the source of creativity. It's one of the most powerful archetypes in the Asian culture, and it
Yes.
represents the connection of heaven and earth. No surprise that the dragon features on this book. We're almost to the end of the 2025 predictions, but there will be a 2026 book that will be available starting in November. I've learned from Eve that she's going to have a new publication for the predictions of the energy for 2026. Until then, have a great month, and I look forward to our conversations in November.
I do as well. Thanks, Alice.
Thank you, Deborah.